Greenfield woke up slowly. The streetlights were still battling the first rays of sunlight when Marcus Holloway opened his eyes. 5:30. His alarm wasn't set to go off for another 15 minutes, but 10 years of working as a mechanic had made him an early riser. He slipped out from under the covers carefully, trying not to wake Audrey, although he knew she was a heavy sleeper and wouldn't wake up even if he turned on the light. Walking into the bathroom, Marcus stared at his reflection. 37 years old and already gray hair was showing at his temples. The wrinkles around his eyes were becoming more noticeable. Working with heavy parts and constant tension had made his hands stiff and covered with calluses that even the expensive cream Audrey had given him last Christmas couldn't soften. He had never used it. Marcus brushed his teeth, took a shower, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. They had bought their small house in the suburbs of Greenfield 5 years ago, taking out a 20-year mortgage. At the time, it had seemed like the beginning of something wonderful. Now, however, the house reminded Marcus more of a beautiful backdrop for a non-existent happy family. He took a sip of hot coffee and glanced at the clock. 6:15. 1 hour until he had to leave. Marcus took out yesterday's newspaper and began rereading the sports section, an old habit he couldn't shake, even in the age of smartphones. At 7 o'clock, Audrey appeared in the kitchen, already fully dressed, with her hair perfectly styled and her makeup flawless. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a strict bun, and her dark blue suit accentuated her slender figure. "Good morning," Marcus said, without looking up from the newspaper. "Good morning," Audrey replied, heading for the coffee maker. "What time are you getting off today?" "Same as usual, 6. "You?" "I might be late. Nolan wants me to help with a presentation for a new client." Marcus thought her voice softened slightly when she mentioned her boss's name. Nolan Prescott was the head of Greenfield Advertising, the advertising agency where Audrey had worked for the past 3 years. Marcus had seen him a couple of times at company parties, a tall, fit man in his mid-40s with a perfect smile and an expensive watch. "Again? That's the 3rd time you've stayed late this week," Marcus remarked, finally looking up from his newspaper. "It's my job, Marcus. I'm the assistant creative director, don't forget. Assistant for 4 years. Isn't that a bit long?" Audrey sighed and turned to the window, taking a sip of coffee. "I'm trying. Nolan promised to consider me for a junior manager position when the next vacancy comes up." "Sure," Marcus folded the newspaper. "Okay, I have to get going." 20 minutes later, they both left the house. Audrey got into her small white sedan, Marcus into his beat-up pickup truck. Without even kissing goodbye, they drove off in different directions. The auto repair shop where Marcus worked was located in the industrial part of town. It was a gray, one-story building with 4 repair bays and a small reception area for customers. The owner, Ray Donovan, had been working there for 30 years and knew everything there was to know about cars. He took Marcus on as an apprentice when he was 23, and they had been working together ever since. "Hey, Holloway," Ray called out to him as Marcus changed into his overalls. "You've got Mrs. Patterson's Ford today. She says there's a knocking sound in the engine." "Again? I checked it last month." "You know these old ladies. The slightest noise and they panic." Marcus nodded and headed for Bay 2, where a dark blue Ford Focus was already waiting. The work was routine, his hands moving automatically. He had been tinkering with engines, changing oil, adjusting clutches, and fixing brake problems for 15 years. The work used to be satisfying. Now, however, Marcus increasingly found himself thinking that he had become a robot, performing the same movements day after day. At lunchtime, he sat down on a toolbox and took out a sandwich he had made at home. Jack Murphy, another mechanic, a guy of about 25 with tattoos on both arms, sat down next to him. "How's Audrey?" Jack asked, opening an energy drink. "Fine," Marcus shrugged. "Still working at that advertising agency?" "Yeah, same place." Have you thought about changing jobs? You were offered a position at the Toyota dealership. They would have paid you more. I'm used to it here, Marcus replied, although he had actually thought about switching jobs often. But that would have required additional training, and he had no free time or energy left. After lunch, he finished up with Mrs. Patterson's Ford. The problem turned out to be a loose oil pan, and started on a Chevrolet with a punctured radiator. The day dragged on slowly, like all the previous ones. At the same time, Audrey was sitting at her desk in the Greenfield advertising office. It was a modern glass and concrete building in the city center, with an open floor plan and minimalist furniture. Her desk was next to Nolan Prescott's office, from which muffled voices could be heard. The creative director was discussing something with the art director. Audrey was checking her email and scheduling meetings for the following week. At the next desk, Melanie Chang, a copywriter, was typing enthusiastically, pausing occasionally to stare thoughtfully at the ceiling. "How was your weekend, Audrey?" Melanie asked, noticing that her colleague had momentarily looked away from her monitor. "The usual: cleaning, laundry, shopping. How about you?" "Oh, Brian and I went to that new restaurant on Maple Street. The food was amazing. You and Marcus should definitely try it." Audrey smiled faintly. She and Marcus hadn't been to a restaurant in, how long? 6 months? A year? It used to be a tradition. Dinner out every first Friday of the month. Now they usually just ordered delivery and ate in front of the TV, barely speaking to each other. Nolan's office door opened and the art director emerged, holding a folder of sketches. Nolan himself appeared next, impeccably dressed, wearing a burgundy tie that perfectly matched his gray suit. "Audrey, come in, please," he said, and Audrey detected a note in his voice she hadn't noticed before. Or was she just imagining it? She took her notebook and entered the office. Nolan closed the door and pointed to the chair opposite his desk. "How's the presentation for Technosphere coming along?" "I've finished the basic layout. Would you like to see it?" "I'd love to, but a little later. Right now, I'd like to discuss something else with you." Nolan didn't sit down at his desk, but in the chair next to Audrey. She caught a faint scent of his cologne, something woody with a hint of citrus. "There's going to be an opening for a junior account manager at the company. Erica is going on maternity leave next month." Audrey's heart began to beat faster. She had been waiting for this opportunity for years. "I'm considering several candidates, including you," Nolan continued. "You have good potential, Audrey, but there are other candidates with more relevant experience." "I understand," she said, trying to sound calm, although inside she was disappointed. "Don't get discouraged yet." Nolan smiled and touched her hand lightly. "You have a chance. We'll need to work more closely together in the coming weeks so I can better assess your potential." Audrey nodded, unsure how to interpret his touch. A friendly gesture of support or something more. "Maybe you'll stay late today. We can work on the TechSphere presentation together and I'll give you some tips." "Sure, no problem." As she left the office, Audrey thought about it. A promotion would mean a raise of at least 30%. She and Marcus could finally renovate the bathroom, maybe even take out a loan to buy him a newer car. And just as important, she would no longer feel stuck in one place. That evening, Audrey stayed late at the office to work with Nolan on the presentation. Everyone else had already gone home, and the empty office was strangely quiet. Nolan sat next to her, so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, pointing at the screen and explaining the changes he wanted to see in the layout. "Let's use bolder colors here. TechSphere wants to look innovative, not conservative." Audrey nodded and made corrections, feeling mixed emotions. On the one hand, she was flattered by the attention of such a successful man, but on the other, something deep down told her that Nolan wanted more than just to improve the presentation. She got home at almost 10 o'clock. Marcus had already eaten dinner and was watching TV in the living room. "Hi," Audrey said, taking off her shoes in the hallway. "Sorry I'm so late. I left you some lasagna in the microwave." "Thanks, but I'm not hungry. My colleagues and I ordered food to the office. The lie slipped out before she could stop it. In fact, she had just grabbed a sandwich from the vending machine. Marcus nodded, his eyes glued to the screen where some action movie was playing. Audrey went upstairs, took a shower, and went to bed with a book. An hour later, Marcus got up, changed, and lay down next to her, turning his back to her. Without saying a word, he turned off his bedside lamp. Audrey stared at the ceiling for a while, listening to her husband's steady breathing. When had they become strangers to each other? They used to talk for hours before going to sleep, sharing their impressions and making plans. Now it was as if a wall of unspoken words and faded feelings had grown between them. Turning on her side, she closed her eyes. For some reason, an image of Nolan appeared before her inner eye, his attentive gaze and slight smile. Audrey tried to push these thoughts away, but they stubbornly returned, intertwining with dreams of a promotion and a new life. Thursday turned out to be surprisingly warm for mid-autumn. Audrey left the Greenfield advertising office around 6 in the evening and stopped on the steps, turning her face to the last rays of the sun. She couldn't get her conversation with Nolan out of her head. That morning, he had called her into his office and told her that the final decision on the junior manager position would be made next week. "You're still on the list of candidates," he said, shuffling through some papers, "but Jason has more impressive experience." Jason Warren. Of course. That sycophant had only been with the company for a year and a half, but he had managed to worm his way into the good graces of the entire management team. Audrey tried not to show her irritation. "Maybe we should discuss this in a more informal setting?" Nolan looked up and gave her that special look that sent shivers down her spine. "I'll be at the Lakeview Hotel tomorrow evening. Business meeting with clients from Chicago. I'll be free around 9, room 312. Audrey didn't answer, just nodded and left the office. She thought about Nolan's offer all day. It wasn't said directly, but the subtext was obvious. A promotion in exchange for what exactly? A one-time fling? Regular meetings? She didn't know. Now, standing on the steps of the office building, Audrey made up her mind. Today she would talk to Marcus. On her way home, she stopped at the supermarket and bought groceries for a special dinner: steaks, fresh vegetables for a salad, and a bottle of expensive wine. The last time she had cooked something like this was probably on their 5th anniversary. When she entered the house, Audrey was surprised to find that Marcus hadn't returned yet. He usually came home before her. She put the groceries on the kitchen table and took out her phone. "Marcus, where are you?" "I'm running a little late. Ray asked me to finish up with the Mustang for Greenwood. I'll be there in about 40 minutes. "Okay, I'm making dinner." "Dinner?" His voice sounded surprised. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just felt like it. Don't be too late." Audrey hung up and turned on the oven. Everything inside her was tense with nervous energy. How could she tell her husband that she was going to leave him, and not because of her feelings, but for the sake of her career? The thought seemed monstrous to her, but at the same time, she saw a certain practicality in it. The promotion would mean a $700 raise a month, $8,400 a year. In a few years, that money could significantly change their lives. They could travel more often, pay off their mortgage faster, maybe even start saving for their children's education. Children whom they still didn't have. It was a topic that she and Marcus had stopped discussing 3 years ago, after several unsuccessful attempts. At first, they put it off because of their careers and finances, then because of Audrey's health problems, and now it seemed that the time had passed. 34 wasn't the end of the world, of course, but something told her it wasn't just about age. Their marriage was falling apart, though neither of them was willing to admit it. Audrey chopped vegetables for a salad, trying to collect her thoughts. Over the past few weeks, she had noticed Nolan spending more and more time around her, casual touches while discussing projects, compliments about her work and appearance, offers to drive her home. She wasn't naive and understood where this was going, and today's proposal was the culmination of this slow dance. At 8 o'clock, the front door opened and Marcus walked into the house. The smell of meat and stewed vegetables filled the kitchen. "Wow," he said, stopping in the doorway. "Is it some kind of holiday?" Audrey smiled and walked over to kiss him on the cheek. It used to be a normal greeting, but now it seemed like an almost forgotten ritual. "Go take a shower and I'll set the table." Marcus looked at her suspiciously but said nothing and headed upstairs. 15 minutes later, he came back down, changed into a clean t-shirt and jeans, his hair still damp from the shower. The table was set as they hadn't done in a long time: candles, wine glasses, napkins. It was like their first date or their wedding anniversary. Marcus sat down in his usual place and unfolded his napkin. "It looks amazing. I can't remember the last time you cooked like this." "In February, on your birthday," Audrey replied, pouring wine. "Right," he nodded, though he didn't seem too sure. They began to eat in silence. Marcus nodded from time to time, indicating that he liked the food. Audrey barely touched her plate, feeling her heart beat faster and faster. Finally, when the plates were half empty, she took a deep breath. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." He froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, then slowly put it down on his plate. "I'm listening." "I've been offered a promotion. Or rather, there's a chance for a promotion." "That's great," he said, a hint of a smile crossing his face. "Assistant manager, right? You mentioned that." "Yes." Audrey took a sip of wine. "But there's a complication." "What kind of complication?" "Nolan is considering several candidates, and he's leaning toward Jason." Marcus frowned. "Your boss is an idiot if he can't see that you deserve that promotion more than anyone else." She smiled slightly. Marcus's support warmed her heart, but it only made the conversation ahead of her more difficult. "He hinted that I could get the job if I agreed to certain conditions." "What conditions?" Audrey looked him straight in the eye. "He wants to meet me tomorrow evening at the Lakeview Hotel." Marcus froze. Understanding slowly dawned in his eyes. "Are you serious?" His voice was unexpectedly quiet. "I've thought this through," Audrey said quickly, as if afraid that if she stopped she wouldn't be able to continue. "This promotion means $700 a month. We could pay off the mortgage faster, fix the bathroom. Are you discussing with me the prospect of cheating on me for money?" Marcus slowly put down the knife he was still clutching in his hand. "I know how it sounds," she looked at him imploringly. "But it's not cheating in the usual sense. It's a business decision. No emotional involvement. One night and our financial situation will be significantly improved." Marcus was silent for so long that Audrey thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he got up from the table and walked over to the window, turning his back to her. "And when are you planning to do this?" he asked in such a calm voice that Audrey was taken aback for a moment. "Tomorrow, at 9 o'clock in the evening." "At the hotel?" "Yes. He has a meeting there with clients from Chicago." Marcus slowly turned to face her. His face was unnaturally pale but calm. "And you really think I'll agree to that?" Audrey swallowed. "I hoped you'd understand. It's just sex, Marcus, nothing more, for the sake of our future." "Our future," he echoed. "Don't you think our future is less important if you're willing to do this?" "We've been drifting apart for a long time," Audrey said quietly. "When was the last time we made love? 2 months ago? 3? We live like roommates, not like husband and wife. And your solution is to not try to fix it, but to sleep with your boss." "I tried." Her voice was tinged with desperation. "I tried to talk to you, but you're always too tired or too busy. We stopped talking, stopped touching each other. Sometimes I feel like you don't even notice me." Marcus looked down. "I know things aren't perfect between us, but that's not an answer, Audrey." "Then what is the answer?" Another 5 years of this routine? Another 10 years of mortgage payments? What kind of future do we have, Marcus? He looked at her with a long, searching gaze as if seeing her for the first time. I thought we could make it work, that we would get through this difficult period together. We've been going through this for 3 years, Audrey shook her head. This isn't a rough patch. This is our life. Marcus returned to the table and sat down. His hands were clenched into fists, but his face remained calm. What if I say no? What if I don't want this? Audrey stared into her glass, unable to look up. I don't know. I hoped you would understand. Understand what? That my wife is willing to sleep with another man for money? I'm sorry, but I don't understand that. No, she shook her head. That I'm willing to do what it takes to give us a future, to break out of this rut. Marcus stood up and walked back to the window. His shoulders were tense, but his voice remained even. And you're sure Nolan will keep his word? That after this, he'll really give you a promotion and not find some excuse to back out? Audrey slowly raised her head. There was no reproach in her question, only practical interest. Was Marcus really considering her offer? He made it clear that the decision has almost been made in my favor. We just need to solidify the agreement. Marcus nodded, still not looking at her. And you're ready to do that? Yes. She swallowed the lump in her throat. If you agree. He finally turned to her. His eyes were darker than usual, his gaze heavy. I need to think about it. This is too sudden. Audrey sighed with relief. At least he hadn't rejected the idea outright or made a scene. Maybe he would understand. Of course, I understand. Marcus looked at his half-eaten dinner, then silently left the kitchen. A minute later, Audrey heard the front door slam. She remained sitting at the table with the candle slowly burning down, illuminating the almost untouched food. Outside, Marcus got into his pickup truck but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, staring into the darkness. Inside, he was torn apart by pain and rage. How could she suggest such a thing? How could she think he would agree? That he would let her sleep with another man? Her boss? For money? Marcus slammed his hand on the steering wheel. What angered him most was not the proposal itself, but the fact that Audrey seemed to have already made up her mind. She hadn't come to ask for advice, but to present him with a fait accompli. And this after 10 years of marriage. Something inside him broke. He knew that their relationship had long since ceased to be what it once was. The passion had faded, and their conversations had become short and formal. But he still loved her, or thought he did. And now? Marcus started the car and slowly drove out of the yard. He needed to drive, to clear his head. His thoughts were jumbled, jumping from one thing to another. He remembered their first meeting. Audrey was working as a waitress in a cafe where he often stopped by after work. Her smile, her laughter when he awkwardly tried to ask her out on a date. Their first kiss on the beach by the lake. Their wedding in a small church on the outskirts of Greenfield. Their first home, a tiny apartment they rented, saving every penny to save up for a down payment on their own place. Somewhere along the way, everything changed. Audrey became more ambitious, striving for career advancement, while he was content with his job as a mechanic. He didn't envy her ambitions. On the contrary, he was proud of her. But gradually, a wall of unspoken words and different expectations grew between them. And now, this. Betrayal, if you wanted to call it that. Betrayal disguised as a rational decision. Marcus stopped the car at a viewpoint overlooking Greenfield at night. The city lights twinkled below, like reflections of the starry sky. Teenagers and couples often gathered here. Now the spot was empty. It was a weekday evening, and everyone had gone home. He sat in the car, trying to collect his thoughts. What should he do next? Leave? That would be the easiest solution. Pack his things, find an apartment, file for divorce. but 10 years of living together couldn't be erased so easily. Marcus took out his phone and stared at the wallpaper for a long time. A photo of him and Audrey taken 3 years ago during a trip to the mountains. They were smiling, happy and carefree. Back then, everything was still fine. He opened his contact list and found the number of his old friend Tom Riley, a lawyer he hadn't spoken to in a couple of years. His finger hovered over the call button, but at the last moment Marcus changed his mind and put his phone back in his pocket. It wasn't time yet. He needed to think things through carefully. No rash decisions. Maybe he should talk to Audrey again, try to understand how serious she was. Perhaps it was just a momentary weakness, a desire to escape the routine at any cost. He started the car and drove slowly home. With or without Audrey, he had to decide what to do with his life, and he had to do it by tomorrow evening. Marcus returned home late, after Audrey had already gone to bed. He quietly went up to the bedroom, undressed in the dark, and lay down on his side of the bed, trying to stay as far away from his wife as possible. He couldn't sleep. Thoughts of her proposal swirled in his head, each one more painful than the last. In the morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual. Audrey was still asleep, curled up on her side of the bed. He looked at her face, relaxed, calm, without a trace of yesterday's tension. How could she sleep so peacefully after what she had suggested? He got up quietly and went down to the kitchen. The remains of last night's dinner were still on the table. Audrey hadn't even bothered to clear them away. Marcus mechanically gathered the plates and put them in the dishwasher, then made coffee and sat down at the table. The decision came to him suddenly, like a switch being flipped. If Audrey was really going to do this, he had to know for sure. He had to have proof, not to expose her. What would be the point of that? But to know the truth, the whole truth, without embellishment or evasive phrases. Marcus finished his coffee and went upstairs. Audrey was already up and in the bathroom. He could hear the water running. He quickly got dressed, went downstairs, left the house and got into his car. It was almost an hour and a half before work and he knew where he was going. The Technopoint electronics store opened at 8 in the morning. Marcus was one of the first customers. He walked past the shelves with televisions and computers to the surveillance and security section. "How can I help you?" asked the sales assistant, a young man in a blue company shirt. "I need something compact for recording conversations, with good sound quality." "We have several options," the sales assistant nodded. "What are you using it for?" Marcus hesitated for a moment. "I want to record business meetings. I sometimes miss important details." The consultant nodded understandingly and pointed to a display case with small devices. "This model is very popular. It's a miniature voice recorder with a sensitive microphone. It has 16 gigabytes of memory and can record for up to 20 hours continuously. It's voice activated so you don't waste memory on silence." Marcus picked up the device. It was slightly larger than a matchbox, black in color with several buttons on the side panel. "I'll take it." After paying, Marcus returned to his car and unpacked his purchase. He carefully studied the instructions, then turned on the device and checked how it worked. The recording quality was excellent, even when he spoke quietly. But most importantly, the device was really compact. Small enough to fit in the side pocket of Audrey's bag, where she usually kept small items such as lipstick and tissues, a place she rarely looked. Marcus put the recorder in his pocket and drove to work. The day dragged on painfully slowly. He made several mistakes in the simplest of tasks, which puzzled Ray. "Are you okay, Holloway?" his boss asked when Marcus dropped a wrench for the second time in an hour. "Yeah, just didn't get enough sleep." "Problems at home?" "Nothing much." Ray patted him on the shoulder and walked away, but Marcus noticed the concerned look he gave him over his shoulder. During his lunch break, Marcus took out his phone and opened the search engine. "Nolan Prescott Greenfield Advertising," he typed. The search engine returned several links. The first led to the company's website, where there was a page with photos and brief biographies of the management. Nolan Prescott, creative director. Photo: a man with a perfect smile and a confident gaze. The short biography mentioned 20 years of experience in the advertising industry, several prestigious awards, and an education at the Rhode Island School of Design. The next link led to an article in a local newspaper from 2 years ago. Greenfield Advertising had won a regional award for an advertising campaign for a supermarket chain. In the photo, Nolan stood in the center of a group of employees holding the award. Audrey was there too, standing slightly apart, but her gaze was not directed at the camera, but at Nolan. Marcus gritted his teeth and continued his search. Social media, mentions in professional publications, and there it was, a photo from some charity event. Nolan Prescott with his wife, Haley, a slender blonde in an elegant black dress. Greenfield Advertising creative director Nolan Prescott with his wife at the annual City Hall charity ball. Marcus saved the photo and closed the search. Now he had a name: Haley Prescott. The second round of searching yielded a few more results. Haley had an Instagram page where she posted photos of her paintings and interior designs. Apparently, she was an artist and interior designer. Her profile listed the address of her studio in downtown Greenfield. Marcus closed his phone and went back to work. A plan was gradually forming in his head, although he wasn't sure what he was going to do with the information he had. For now, he needed proof. And then he would decide. In the evening, Marcus returned home before Audrey. He quickly went up to the bedroom and found her bag, a large leather one with lots of compartments and pockets. Marcus took out the voice recorder, turned it on, and carefully placed it in the side pocket, covering it with the handkerchiefs Audrey always kept there. Then he went down to the kitchen and started cooking dinner, something simple but edible, not the fancy meal Audrey had prepared yesterday for their special conversation. When Audrey returned, Marcus had already set the table. "Hi," she said as she entered the kitchen. "Did you make dinner? That's unexpected." "I decided it was time for me to do something around the house," he replied, trying to make his voice sound as casual as possible. Audrey approached him and tentatively touched his hand. "Marcus, about yesterday—" "Let's eat first," he interrupted. "I'm hungry." They sat down at the table and began to eat in silence. After a few minutes, Audrey put down her fork. "I understand that you're upset, but I really think this could help us." Marcus chewed slowly, not looking at her. "Help with what exactly?" "To break out of our routine, to start a new life, with financial opportunities we never had." "And you're willing to do that?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I've made up my mind." Marcus finally looked up. "What exactly have you decided?" "To meet with Nolan tomorrow, like we discussed. So my opinion doesn't matter?" "Of course it does." Audrey leaned forward. "I want you to understand me, support me." "Support you in what? In cheating on me?" "It's not cheating in the usual sense, it's a business deal." Marcus put down his fork. "Okay, let's say that's true. And how often do you plan on making these business deals?" "What?" Audrey frowned. "This is a one-time thing, just to get a promotion." "What if in a year there's an opportunity to become a senior manager or a director of client services? Are you going to suck up to him again?" "Marcus!" Audrey's eyes widened in indignation. "Don't say that." "What should I say?" He shrugged with feigned indifference. "Call it what you want, but it doesn't change the fact." She took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Listen, I know this sounds terrible, but I truly believe this could change our lives for the better. It's not about feelings or relationships. It's about opportunity." Marcus looked at her for a long time. "You really believe Nolan will keep his word, that he'll give you a promotion after this?" "I think so," Audrey nodded. "He needs this night and I need the promotion. It's a win-win deal." "What about his wife?" Audrey froze for a moment. What does his wife have to do with this? Is she part of the deal? Has she been told the terms? Of course not. Audrey shook her head. She can't know. No one can. Except me. I didn't want to hide it from you. Her voice softened. I wanted to be honest. Marcus smiled, but there was no joy in it. Honesty. A fine quality in a person who plans to cheat. Stop calling it cheating. Audrey raised her voice. It's not. What is it then? I already told you it's a business decision, something we have to do for our future. Marcus shook his head and stood up from the table. I need to think. I can't discuss this right now. He left the kitchen, leaving Audrey sitting alone. Going up to the bedroom, Marcus sat down on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around his head. How had they gotten to this point? When had their relationship turned into a farce where cheating was discussed like a business plan? He heard Audrey clearing the dishes downstairs, then the sound of the TV in the living room. It was a normal evening, except that his wife was planning to sleep with her boss tomorrow, and she wanted him to approve. Marcus lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't going to stop Audrey, let her do what she wanted, but he would know the truth, the whole truth, every word, every sound, and then he would decide what to do next. In the morning, they barely spoke to each other. Audrey took longer than usual to get ready for work, carefully choosing her outfit and doing her makeup. Marcus watched her with silent disgust, which he hid behind a mask of indifference. Are you going to be late today? He asked casually as they ate breakfast. Yes, Audrey said, not looking up from her plate. I'll probably be back tomorrow morning. So you've made up your mind? She nodded. I have. And you won't change your mind? No. Audrey finally looked at him. I believe it's the right decision. Marcus shrugged. Good luck, then. He got up from the table, grabbed his car keys, and left the house without saying another word. Marcus worked silently at the auto repair shop all day, answering his co-workers' questions with short phrases. Ray glanced at him several times with concern but didn't ask anything. By 5 o'clock, Marcus felt he couldn't stay there any longer. He approached his boss and asked to leave early. Is something wrong? Ray asked, wiping his hands with a rag. I'm just not feeling very well. Okay, go ahead, Ray nodded. Hope it's not contagious. Marcus changed his clothes and went out to the parking lot. Getting into his car, he took out his phone and opened the address for Haley Prescott's studio. According to the navigation system, it was no more than a 15-minute drive. The studio was on the second floor of a small building in the city center. Haley Prescott, Interior Design, read the modest sign at the entrance. Marcus climbed the stairs and found himself in a spacious room with large windows. Paintings hung on the walls, abstract canvases in muted tones. In the center of the room were several easels and a work table covered with fabric samples and catalogs. Haley Prescott was standing at one of the windows, looking at a small framed painting. She was exactly as Marcus had imagined her from the photographs. A slender blonde in her 40s with delicate features and an attentive gaze. Hearing footsteps, she turned around. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Mrs. Prescott? Marcus stopped at the doorway, feeling his throat go dry. Yes, that's me, she said, putting the painting down and coming closer. Did you make an appointment? No, I need to talk to you about your husband. Haley frowned, her expression wary. About Nolan? Who are you? My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm Audrey Holloway's husband. She works at Greenfield Advertising. Haley's face softened. Oh, Audrey. Yes, I know who she is. Nolan speaks highly of her, says she's a talented employee. Marcus clenched his fists in his pockets. Perhaps too talented. Excuse me? Haley tilted her head, confused. Mrs. Prescott, I hate to say this, but your husband and my wife are supposed to meet tonight at the Lakeview Hotel. Haley froze, her face becoming as still as a mask. And how do you know that? Audrey told me herself, Marcus took a step forward. She said Nolan offered her a promotion in exchange for certain services. Are you out of your mind? Haley's voice took on a steely tone. You barge into my studio and accuse my husband of sleeping with his employees? I have proof. Marcus took out his phone. A recording of their conversation in the office. I planted a voice recorder in Audrey's bag. That's illegal. Haley crossed her arms over her chest. Maybe, but it's true. He turned on the recording. At first, there were the usual office sounds. Keyboard typing, voices in the distance. Then Audrey's voice, talking to someone on the phone. And then a conversation that appeared to be taking place in Nolan's office. Are you ready for tonight? A male voice asked. Yes, Audrey replied. Are you sure no one will find out? Absolutely. I booked a room under a different name. Like I said, 9 o'clock tonight, room 312. I'll be waiting. And after that, you'll get what you want. The assistant manager position. Just like we agreed. Marcus stopped the recording and looked at Haley. Her face paled, her lips pressed into a thin line. Why did you come to me? She asked quietly. What do you want? I want you to know the truth, Marcus replied. What you do with that information is up to you. That's all? No demands? Haley looked at him suspiciously. No money? No blackmail? No. Marcus shook his head. I just want everyone to know what Audrey and your husband are willing to do to get what they want. Haley walked over to the desk and leaned on it, as if her legs had suddenly given way. This has happened before, she said, almost in a whisper. In other cities, in other companies. That's why we moved to Greenfield 3 years ago. I thought things would be different here. Marcus was silent, not knowing what to say. You said the Lakeview Hotel? Asked Haley after a pause. Room 312? Yes, at 9 o'clock tonight. Haley straightened up, her eyes darkening. Thank you for the information, Mr. Holloway. I'll take care of it. What are you going to do? Isn't it obvious? She smiled faintly. I'll go to the hotel and personally welcome my husband and your wife. Marcus nodded. I can go with you. No. Haley shook her head. I'll do it myself. And there's something else I want to do. What exactly? I have a friend at Greenfield Advertising. Actually, higher up, at the company's headquarters in Chicago. Donald Murphy, the president. We went to college together. I think he'd be interested to hear how his creative director hands out promotions. Marcus felt something cold tighten in his chest. Are you sure? More than sure, Haley smiled harshly. Nolan has thought he could get away with this for too long. It's time to put an end to it. I understand. Marcus headed for the exit. I'm sorry I had to break the news to you. Don't be sorry, Haley looked at him with a strange, absent gaze. Better the bitter truth than a sweet lie. It's not easy for you either. Yes, Marcus nodded. It's not easy. What are you going to do about your wife? He stopped at the door. I haven't decided yet, but I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it. That's right, Haley nodded. No one should go unpunished. Marcus left the studio and walked down to his car. As he got behind the wheel, he felt a strange emptiness. The deed was done. Now all he could do was wait and watch as what had once been his life fell apart. Friday was a gloomy day. Heavy clouds hung over Greenfield, promising rain in the evening. Marcus spent the day at the auto shop mechanically performing his usual tasks. His hands worked on their own while his thoughts were far away. At lunchtime, he asked Ray for a couple of hours off, saying he needed to go to the bank. Ray, still concerned about his condition, agreed without asking any questions. Marcus did indeed head to the bank, but not the one where he and Audrey had a joint account. He drove to a branch of First National on the other side of town, where no one knew him. There, he opened a new account in his name and transferred half of the money from their joint account to it. Not all of it. He didn't want to leave Audrey without any money, but enough to support himself for the time being. After the bank, Marcus stopped by the office of Tom Riley, his old friend and lawyer whom he had called the day before. "Sorry to bother you during work hours," Marcus said, shaking his friend's hand. "Don't apologize," Tom said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. It sounded serious on the phone. It was. Marcus sat down and looked at his old friend. In the 10 years since they had last seen each other, Tom had hardly changed. Still the same thin, energetic man with a penetrating gaze. "I need your help with my divorce." Tom raised his eyebrows but refrained from commenting. "How urgent is it?" "Very," Marcus leaned forward. "I want the papers ready as soon as possible, and I want everything to be fair, 50-50. "Okay," Tom nodded, turning on his computer. "I need the details, and the reason. It's important for the court." "Cheating," Marcus said briefly. "Do you have proof?" "I'll have it by evening." Tom looked at his friend intently. "Are you sure you want to do this? Divorce is a serious decision." "I've never been more sure," Marcus was adamant. "She betrayed not only our vows, but herself. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it." Tom nodded and began filling out the form on the computer. "No children, right?" "No." "Real estate?" "A house in both our names with a mortgage. Different cars, each in our own name." "Any major joint purchases?" "Nothing significant. Furniture, appliances. I won't insist on that." "Understood." Tom made a few notes. "I'll have the documents ready by the end of the day. Call me in the evening and I'll email them to you." "Thanks." Marcus stood up and shook his friend's hand. "I appreciate your help." "You're welcome." Tom walked him to the door. "And Marcus, take care. It's always tough no matter what the circumstances." Marcus nodded and left the office. His next stop was a hardware store, where he bought new locks for the front door and the back door. Then he returned to the auto repair shop, where he worked the rest of the day. At the same time, Audrey sat in the Greenfield advertising office, barely able to concentrate on her work. Her gaze kept returning to the clock on her computer screen. The day dragged on agonizingly slowly. In the next office, Nolan was holding a meeting with the art director and copywriters. Through the glass partition, Audrey could see him, confident, authoritative, giving orders. It was hard to believe that in a few hours she would be in his arms. The thought made her chest tighten, not with anticipation, but with a strange sense of doom. Closer to lunchtime, Nolan called her into his office. "How are you feeling?" he asked when she entered. "Fine." Audrey tried to keep her voice steady. "You haven't forgotten about our meeting?" "No." "Good." He smiled his trademark confident smile. 9 o'clock, as agreed. Room 312. "I remember," Audrey nodded. "I already spoke to Eric in HR. Your promotion is practically approved." Nolan winked at her. "All that's left is to finalize the agreement." Audrey left the office feeling nauseous. What was she doing? Was she doing the right thing? But it was too late to back out. The decision had been made, and she was determined to see it through. Haley Prescott spent the day preparing for the evening. She called Donald Murphy, the president of the parent company in Chicago, and arranged a video call. Then she stopped by an electronics store and bought a miniature video camera that could be attached to her clothing. The salesperson eagerly demonstrated how it worked. Excellent image quality even in low light, recording to a built-in memory card that could be easily copied to a computer. At 6:30 in the evening, Audrey left the office and headed for her car. The rain that had been threatening all day finally began to fall, light but persistent. She got behind the wheel and sat there for a while, watching the raindrops run down the windshield. Then she dialed Marcus's number. "Hi," she said when he answered. "I'm leaving." "Where?" His voice sounded indifferent. "You know where. To the hotel." "Oh, right. Good luck." "Marcus, Audrey fell silent, not knowing what to say. "I'm doing this for us." "Sure," he replied in the same indifferent tone. Whatever you say. You're angry. No, I'm not angry. I don't feel anything. Do what you want, Audrey. He hung up, leaving her listening to the short beeps. Audrey placed the phone on the seat next to her and started the car. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she noticed that her hands were shaking. The Lakeview Hotel was a 15-minute drive from her office in the business district of Greenfield. It was a modern glass and concrete building 15 stories high. Audrey parked in the underground parking lot and took the elevator to the lobby. It was only 8 o'clock. She decided to go to the hotel bar and have a drink to calm her nerves. After ordering a glass of white wine, Audrey sat down at a table in the corner and waited. Meanwhile, Haley Prescott was also approaching the hotel. She had found out in advance that room 312 was on the third floor in the west wing of the building. In her spacious bag, she had a video camera, a phone, and a notebook with questions she had prepared in advance. She wanted the exposure to be as well documented as possible. Entering the hotel lobby, Haley looked around. At the bar, she spotted Audrey sitting alone with a glass of wine. Audrey didn't see her. Her gaze was fixed on the space in front of her, her face tense and pensive. Haley went up to the third floor and found room 312. The door was closed. She listened. Someone was inside. She could hear footsteps and the sound of running water. Nolan had already arrived and, judging by the sounds, was getting ready for the meeting. Haley went back down to the lobby and took up a position where she could see both the bar entrance and the elevators. Now, all she had to do was wait. At 8:45, Audrey finished her wine and left the bar. Haley followed her discreetly, keeping her distance. They took different elevators to the third floor. Audrey stopped in front of room 312 and took a deep breath. Then she raised her hand and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Nolan smiled when he saw her. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Audrey entered and the door closed behind her. Haley waited a few minutes, then took the video camera out of her bag, attached it to her lapel, and turned it on. Approaching the door of room 312, she inserted the key card she had received at the front desk, saying that her husband had already checked in but had forgotten to give her the card. The door opened silently. Haley entered a small hallway leading to the main room. Voices could be heard from inside. "Would you like a drink?" Nolan asked. "No, thank you. I already had one at the bar," Audrey replied. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "Don't be. It's just a business meeting, with some additional benefits." Haley took a deep breath and stepped out of the hallway into the room. Nolan and Audrey were standing by the window, him holding a glass of whiskey, her nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse. When they saw Haley, they both froze. "Good evening," Haley said, surprised at her own calmness. "Did I interrupt, Haley?" Nolan put his glass on the table, his face turning pale. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to join your business meeting," she smiled, keeping her eyes on her husband. "It is a business meeting, right?" Audrey looked as if she was about to sink through the floor. Her eyes widened in horror, her face covered with red spots. "Mrs. Prescott, Please, call me Haley," the woman interrupted, still smiling. "After all, we're almost friends. You're going to sleep with my husband, and I know you're doing it for a promotion. What a wonderful deal." Nolan took a step forward, his face contorted with anger. "How did you find out? Who told you?" "It doesn't matter." Haley took the video camera from her lapel and showed it to them. "The important thing is that now I have proof. I think Donald Murphy will be interested to know how you handle job openings at the company." "You wouldn't dare." Nolan took another step toward her. "I dare you." Haley didn't back down. "I've put up with your affairs for years. In Boston, in Philadelphia. Every time you promised it wouldn't happen again. That it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. And here we are again." She turned to Audrey, who was still standing by the window, frozen like a statue. And you, sweetheart, did you really think he'd give you a promotion? That you were special? He's had dozens like you, and none of them got what they were promised. That's not true, Nolan managed to say. Haley, stop. Not true? Haley laughed, but there was no joy in her laughter. Maybe you'd like to tell me about Emily from Boston or Jessica from Philadelphia. Also, talented employees you promised career advancement. I wonder where they are now. Audrey finally snapped out of her stupor. I have to go. She headed for the exit, but Haley blocked her way. Oh no, honey. You're not going anywhere. Not now when the party's just getting started. Please, Audrey said, tears welling up in her eyes. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have. Of course you shouldn't have, Haley nodded. But you decided that your career was more important than marriage, more important than self-respect. And here we all are. Nolan tried to grab the camera from his wife, but she deftly stepped back. Don't make this worse, honey. I already sent a copy of the recording to my email, and I have a video call with Donald scheduled in. She glanced at her watch. 30 minutes. Want to join me? You're going to ruin my career. Nolan's face contorted with anger and fear. You ruined it yourself, Haley shrugged. I'm just a witness. She turned to Audrey. As for you, I think your husband deserves better. I met him yesterday. He's a nice man, caring. And you were willing to betray him for a career you wouldn't have gotten anyway. Does Marcus know? Audrey's face turned even paler. Of course he does. He told me about your little deal. He showed me the recording of your conversation at the office. Recording? Audrey looked at her in confusion. Oh, yes. He planted a voice recorder in your bag. Clever move, I must say. Audrey slowly sank into a chair, her legs giving way beneath her. So he knew everything, and he let me come here on purpose. He probably wanted definitive proof, Haley shrugged. I would have done the same in his place. Nolan paced the room like a caged animal. What do you want, Haley? Money? I'll pay you. Any amount. I don't want your money, she said, looking at him with contempt. But I want a divorce, and half of everything we have, including the house in Vermont that you think I don't know about. Nolan stopped, his face expressing shock. You know about the house? I know everything, dear. All your accounts, all your hiding places. I was just waiting for the right moment, and now it's here. Haley glanced at her watch. I have to go. I don't want to be late for my meeting with Donald. She headed for the door, but stopped and turned back. By the way, Audrey, don't count on getting a job at Greenfield Advertising, or at any other advertising agency in town for that matter. Greenfield is a small town, and rumors spread fast. Haley left, leaving Nolan and Audrey standing in silence in the room. They looked at each other, both shocked and unable to speak. When she reached the lobby, Haley went outside and got into her car. Her hands were shaking as she took out her phone. She dialed Marcus's number. It's done, she said when he answered. I caught them in the room. I recorded everything on my phone. Thank you. Marcus's voice sounded lifeless. Are you really going to call the company president? I'm already on the phone. On speaker. Do you want to listen? No. Marcus paused. It's enough for me to know that she really went through with it, that she chose this over our marriage. I understand, Haley said softly. I'm sorry it turned out this way. Me too, Marcus replied, but at least now everything is clear. They said goodbye, and Haley started a video call with Donald Murphy. The company president answered almost immediately, a gray-haired man in a formal suit with an attentive gaze. Haley, long time no see. How are you? Not very well, Donald. I have some information that will interest you. At the same time, Marcus returned home and went upstairs to the bedroom he shared with Audrey. He methodically gathered his belongings, clothes, documents, personal items, everything that belonged to him and was important to him. It wasn't much after 10 years of living together. When he was done packing, he went downstairs and started changing the locks on the front door and the back door. It took him about an hour, but he didn't rush. When everything was ready, Marcus checked his email. Tom had sent him the divorce papers, detailed and ready to be filed in court. Marcus sat down at the kitchen table and read through the documents, not missing a single detail. Everything was exactly as he had requested, an equal division of property, as was only fair. He didn't want to take revenge on Audrey by taking more than his fair share. He just wanted to end this chapter of his life and move on. Closing his email, Marcus took out his phone and dialed Ray's number. "Hi, boss. Sorry for the late call." "No problem, Marcus. What's going on?" "I need some time off, at least a week, personal stuff." "Of course," Ray's voice sounded concerned. "Are you okay?" "No," Marcus replied honestly. "But it will be. I just need some time." "Take as much as you need. You've earned it." "Thanks." Marcus hung up and glanced around the kitchen. So many memories were connected to this house, good and bad. This was where he and Audrey had celebrated their housewarming, cooked Sunday dinners, and made plans for the future. And this was where their marriage had slowly died until it came to its logical conclusion. He carried his bags to the car, then returned to the house to check one last time that he hadn't forgotten anything important. He left a set of new keys and a note for Audrey on the kitchen table. It was short, emotionless, informing her that the divorce papers were ready and would soon be filed in court. As he left the house, Marcus didn't look back. He got into his car and started the engine, ready to go. He didn't know where yet, maybe to his brother in the next town, or to a motel on the outskirts of Greenfield. The main thing was to get away from this house and from the woman who had thrown away 10 years of their life together for a ghost of a chance at a career. Saturday morning greeted Audrey with pouring rain. She opened her eyes in the hotel room she had booked the night before, unable to return home after the humiliating scene at the Lakeview Hotel. Her head was splitting from the wine she had drunk. After Haley left, she and Nolan had parted silently, and Audrey had spent the evening in the hotel bar, trying unsuccessfully to drown her shame and despair in alcohol. She fumbled for her phone on the bedside table. 7 messages and 4 missed calls. 2 messages from Marcus, the rest from her colleagues at Greenfield Advertising. 1 missed call from Nolan, the rest from her colleagues again. Audrey opened the first message from Marcus. "I took my things and changed the locks. The keys are on the kitchen table. The divorce papers are ready. My lawyer will contact you on Monday. I suggested we split everything evenly. I hope you don't mind. You can pick up your things anytime." The second message was sent an hour later. "I transferred some of the money from our joint account to a new one, but I left you enough to get by for the time being. Goodbye, Audrey." Messages from colleagues were much less formal and more curious. "What's going on? Did you hear Nolan got fired? Is it true that Haley Prescott caused a scene at the hotel? Were you there?" Audrey put her phone down, unable to read any further. She slowly sat down on the bed, feeling the room spin slightly before her eyes. Everything had fallen apart. Her marriage, her career, her reputation, everything she had built over the years had been destroyed in one evening because of her own actions. She forced herself to get up and go to the bathroom. The cold water brought her back to her senses a little, but when she looked at her reflection in the mirror, Audrey barely recognized herself. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, her eyelids swollen, her hair tangled. What had she done? Returning to her room, Audrey listened to the voice message from Nolan. His voice sounded cold and distant. "Audrey, this is Nolan. I just spoke with Donald Murphy. We've both been fired. Haley sent him the recording from the hotel and copies of our conversations at the office. I signed a non-disclosure agreement and I advise you to do the same when they contact you. Don't try to contact me. This is an unfortunate turn of events." "An unfortunate turn of events?" Audrey smiled bitterly. How easily he dismissed the situation he had created. No responsibility, no apology. Typical Nolan. She stood up and started getting dressed. There was nothing to do but go home, or rather, to what used to be her home, and pick up at least the essentials. Then she would decide what to do next, where to live, how to find a job with a reputation that would probably be ruined all over Greenfield by the end of the day. In the hotel lobby, the female receptionist gave her a sidelong glance. Had the rumors already reached this far? Audrey paid and quickly went outside, where she was greeted by cold October rain. She got into her car and sat there for a long time, listening to the raindrops drumming on the roof. What now? Where to go? To her parents. They lived 5 hours away, and Audrey hadn't seen them in 2 years. What would she say? "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I tried to sleep with my boss to get a promotion, and now my husband is filing for divorce and I've been fired." In the end, Audrey decided to go home. It was still her home, at least half of it, and she had a right to be there. The drive took 20 minutes. Audrey parked in the driveway and sat there for a while, staring at the front of the house. It was a typical suburban house, one of hundreds in Greenfield. White walls, dark shingles, a small, well-kept lawn. She and Marcus had moved here 5 years ago, full of hopes and plans. She got out of the car and headed for the front door. Of course, the door wouldn't open. Marcus had indeed changed the locks. Audrey remembered his message and walked around the house to enter through the kitchen door. As promised, a set of keys was lying on the table. The house seemed strangely empty, although at first glance everything was in its place. But the absence of Marcus's belongings created a feeling of abandonment. Audrey went up to the bedroom. The wardrobe was half empty. Marcus had taken all his clothes, leaving only her things, neatly hung on hangers. There was nothing left on his side of the bedside table. Not the book he had been reading, not the clock that had always been there, not the photo of the two of them at the lake 5 years ago. He had taken everything that reminded her of him. Audrey sat down on the bed, feeling tears welling up in her throat. What had she done? What had she destroyed her life for? For a career that was now gone, for money she could have earned another way. The phone rang, pulling her out of her bitter thoughts. The number was unknown, but Audrey answered. "Hello? Audrey Holloway?" asked a formal female voice. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Karen Davidson, and I'm with the legal department at Greenfield Advertising. I need to meet with you today to discuss the termination of your employment." "Today?" Audrey blinked. "But today is Saturday." "This is urgent, Miss Holloway. The situation requires immediate resolution. Can you come to the office at 3 o'clock this afternoon?" "Yes, of course," Audrey nodded, although the other person couldn't see her. "Excellent. And, Miss Holloway, please keep this meeting confidential." The call ended, and Audrey sat there with the phone in her hand. So she was really being fired. It wasn't exactly a surprise, but hearing it like that in such an official tone was particularly painful. At the same time, Marcus pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of Greenfield. He had decided not to burden his brother with his presence and had rented a room for a few days while he looked for an apartment. Dropping his travel bag on the bed, he sat down and took out his phone. 3 missed calls, all from Tom Riley, his lawyer. "Tom? Sorry I didn't answer. I was on the road." "No problem," Tom replied. "I prepared the documents as you requested. Everything is standard. Equal division of property, sale of the house if you can't agree otherwise." "Great." Marcus rubbed his eyes. "When can we file?" "Right now." "Come to the office, we'll sign it, and I'll send it right away." "I'll be there in an hour." At Tom's office, Marcus silently read and signed all the documents. No emotional outbursts, no regrets, just weary resignation and a desire to get it over with as quickly as possible. "What are you going to do next?" Tom asked when they were done. "Find a place to live. Go back to work. Get on with my life." Marcus shrugged. "What about Audrey?" I don't know, Marcus replied honestly. And to be honest, I don't want to think about it right now. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Audrey entered the almost empty Greenfield advertising office. The building was usually empty on Saturdays, but now Karen Davidson and a young man from Human Resources who introduced himself as Eric Thompson were waiting for her in the conference room. The next hour was spent on formalities. Audrey signed a termination agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, and received her pay for the time she had worked. Everything happened quickly and impersonally, as if she were not a human being but a faulty mechanism that needed to be removed from the system urgently. The company would prefer to avoid a scandal, Karen said when all the documents had been signed. So the official version is that you left of your own accord. I hope you understand that any public comments contradicting this version will be considered a breach of the non-disclosure agreement. I understand. Audrey nodded. In that case, we're done. Your pass, please. Audrey took a plastic pass card out of her purse and placed it on the table. 5 years with the company had come to an end just like that, on a cold Saturday afternoon, at a conference table, under the gaze of people who saw her as nothing more than a source of potential problems. Leaving the building, she got into her car and dialed Nolan's number without hesitation. This time, he answered. I told you not to call me. His voice was sharp. Nolan, we need to talk. I was just at the office signing some papers. I don't care, Audrey. It's over. It's all over. But what am I supposed to do? Her voice was desperate. I got fired. My husband left me. That's not my problem, Nolan interrupted. I have enough problems of my own. Haley is filing for divorce and wants half of everything I have. But you said you would help me if I never said that. Nolan's voice was cold. And if you think you can prove it, remember the non-disclosure agreement you just signed. The call ended, and Audrey was left listening to the dial tone. Of course. What did she expect? That Nolan, who had used his position to manipulate her, would suddenly show nobility and help her in her time of need. In the evening, as dusk enveloped Greenfield, Audrey sat in her empty house with the lights off. Her phone was ringing off the hook with messages and calls from colleagues, but she didn't answer. She didn't have the strength to explain, to justify herself, to listen to condemnation or false sympathy. On Sunday morning, she woke up with a dull headache and a feeling of complete emptiness inside. Going down to the kitchen, Audrey found that the refrigerator was almost empty. Marcus always did the shopping on weekends. She found a frozen dinner in the freezer and heated it up in the microwave. The food tasted bland, but Audrey forced herself to eat at least half of it. The day dragged on agonizingly slowly. She tried looking for a job online, but quickly realized the futility of the endeavor. No one in Greenfield would hire her after such a scandal. She would have to leave and start over somewhere else. In the evening, Melanie, her colleague and only close friend at the office, called. Audrey, what's going on? All anyone at the office is talking about is you and Nolan. Melanie, I can't talk about it. Non-disclosure agreement. Come on, Melanie snorted. We're friends. I'm sorry, but no, Audrey rubbed her temples. I really can't. Fine, Melanie's voice grew colder. Whatever you want. But if you need help, you know where to find me. On Monday morning, Audrey woke up determined to take action. She couldn't hide anymore. After getting ready, she drove to the bank to check the balance of her and Marcus's joint account. As he had said, half the money had been withdrawn, but the remaining amount would be enough for a few months of modest living until she found a new job. Back home, Audrey began planning her move. Greenfield was too small a town to stay in after such a scandal. She needed to start over somewhere else. Maybe Riverdale? It was far enough away that the rumors wouldn't reach her, but close enough that she wouldn't have to start a completely new life. On Tuesday, Marcus's lawyer, Tom Riley, called her. Miss Holloway, The divorce papers are ready to be filed. Marcus insists on an equal division of property. Do you agree to these terms? Yes, Audrey replied quietly. I agree to all of his terms. In that case, you don't need to hire your own lawyer if you don't want to. The process will take several months, but since there are no disputes, everything should go smoothly. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Audrey paused. Marcus, how is he? He's holding up, the lawyer replied dryly. Anything else? No, that's all. Tell him I'm very sorry. I will. All the best, Miss Holloway. By the end of the week, Audrey had found a tiny apartment in Riverdale and made the down payment. She began sending out resumes to every advertising agency within a 50-mile radius, except those affiliated with Greenfield Advertising. Most didn't even bother to send an automatic reply. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the events at the Lakeview Hotel, she sat on the floor of her bedroom, sorting through her belongings. What should she take with her? What should she leave behind? She would have to divide up everything she and Marcus had shared, but right now she only needed the bare essentials. Working in the business world, she was used to calculations and rationality. She believed that this approach could be applied to all aspects of life. Now, Audrey realized how deeply she had been mistaken. There are things that cannot be calculated, cannot be reduced to gains and losses. Trust, love, self-respect. She had lost all of that for a fleeting chance at a career advancement that never materialized. Meanwhile, Marcus was gradually settling into his new life. He found a small apartment not far from work and moved his things from the motel there over the weekend. Ray and the guys from the auto shop helped him move, then stayed for pizza and beer. Their company helped him not dwell on dark thoughts. How are you holding up? Ray asked when the others had left. Fine, Marcus shrugged. One day at a time. If you need anything, just let me know. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it. On Saturday, when Marcus had finished arranging the furniture in his new apartment, Tom called. The paperwork has been filed. The first hearing is in a month, but it'll probably just be a formality. Good. Thanks for getting on it. Audrey asked me to tell you she's sorry. Marcus was silent for a few seconds. Tell her I don't hold a grudge. I just want this to be over quickly and civilly. I will. Take care, Mark. Hanging up the phone, Marcus walked over to the window. Strange, but he really didn't feel any anger. Only sadness for what had been and could never be again. And perhaps a vague hope that things would be different in the future. That he would meet a woman for whom family would be more important than career ambitions, or that he would be able to build a relationship where career ambitions were not perceived as a threat to the family. On Sunday, Audrey was already in Riverdale, unpacking her few belongings in a tiny rented apartment. The next day, she had an interview at a local advertising agency. The position was much lower than the one she had at Greenfield Advertising, but she had no choice. Sitting on her new bed, she opened a notebook and began to write. She listed all her mistakes, all the moments when she had made the wrong choice. She reread it, then closed the notebook and put it away in a drawer. It was a kind of ritual of awareness and acceptance of what had happened. Now she had to move on. Audrey lay down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, a new chapter of her life would begin, and she would do everything not to repeat her past mistakes, to never again confuse material values with real ones, to never betray those who are truly important for the sake of fleeting gain. Because, as she had learned from her own bitter experience, those who sow betrayal will one day reap loneliness and the loss of everything that really mattered.